Hello, welcome. Happy Friday. Well, yeah, of course it's Friday because today is our OSR Reddit Roundup, and if I have my druthers, which I normally do, it's on Fridays. So, yes, ergo, it is Friday. Sorry I missed last week's. I try not to miss, and I thought I might be able to make it up this week, except I'd forgotten that I had this work offsite that I had to attend to, which meant that I could not attend to this as I would like, but we're back, we're here. I don't have any other notes. Let's just get to it. I haven't checked out the OSR Reddit in a little bit, so hopefully that means they'll be full of stuff to see, to sort through, to suss. I'll give it a one more click. We're on the hot tab if you want to follow along from home. Upvote the hand-drawn island map. Prestigious Taste 434 posted, I reviewed Into the Odd Remastered as a newcomer to the game. I think that's be interesting. Oh, it's okay. Well, we'll go to the blog. I'm not 100% sure if Into the Odd is counted as OSR. I would think that most folks, OSR, NSR, it's in the R's. It's in the SR somewhere. Hey, Derek Mann, good afternoon. Good morning to you. Good afternoon for me. Ian says, literally just now realizing it's Friday. I know that's how it happens. I'm getting curious about this one. So someone's come to this. They never played the 2014, the original game, what came out in 2014. I am curious what they have to say. And, I'm always interested for people's experiences delving in the OSR. So this is at the Wargamer. Whoa, my goodness, what happened? A whole bunch of ads. Wargamer.com. Into the Odd Remastered review. The new edition of industrial horror tabletop role-playing game Into the Odd is an excellent collector's item, but it may put off a lot of players to achieve its vision. All right, that's already an interesting take. I have in my possession a digital copy of Into the Odd Remastered. I think I mentioned this when I actually talked when I had the stream last week, the interview, but it's under embargo until August, and the reason was that they wanted to make sure to give Kickstarter backers a chance to receive their copies, get their copies in. So I'm not sure if they just maybe they just received this as part of a as part of their they kickstarted it, and so they received it and then they got it. I'm assuming maybe it's like that, but I would have done a read through prior to my interview with Chris last week if I could have, but at least for me, having gotten the copy directly from Free League, I want to make sure to honor their embargo. Ian says they were looking into the Odd Remastered the other day. Really want to pick it up. Haven't really read through the original yet. Yeah, I have the original too. It's good. I played unfortunately, it was a really short running game of Into the Odd. It was bringing in a lot of Bastionland stuff. It definitely, and this is where I don't know because I didn't get into it enough. It was a very gonzo kind of game. It felt had a lot of paranoia aspects to it. Like I said, I can't say whether it was Into the Odd itself or Bastionland because I haven't really read a ton of Bastionland. It was in the little bit that we played, it was extremely busy. But I think that was more just how the GM was interpreting and running things. And I know that there was some guidance. I think that they were taking from the book, basically make everywhere the adventure, right? Don't just make town be boring, make it the adventure. Or at least that's how he interpreted it. I'd have to go back and I don't want to put words in Chris McDowell's mouth about what was going on there. And I think that's generally good advice. But what happened in our case is that, at least for me, it was just overload. Like every time, we're trying to get to the adventure location, which was inside of town. We were in a city, and it very much had the sort of like a weird gonzo sort of sci-fi fantasy mashup kind of city. We're trying to get, essentially go, there's rats in the sewers, mutated rats in the sewers need taken care of. Go down to the sewers and take care of it. Like, okay. And just getting from where we were headquartered or where we started to just the beginnings of the adventure, I just felt like just obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And especially for me, because I wasn't really prepared for that. I was expecting more of a, okay, you kind of hand wipe. We're going to do a little star wipe, and you'll sort of be at the spot. I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like a hex crawl, because we weren't really hex crawling. I thought, okay, we'll go down, or maybe eventually we'll start. We'll cut at here's the contract, and then next scene we're at the entrance to the sewers where the fun begins. But that wasn't it. It was get in the building. This is happening in the street, just on this block of the street. Okay, we turn another corner. This other thing's happened. Then this other thing, this other thing, this other thing. And I think one point it was I think after a game when and we were playing we were also playing this play by post though on Discord, or play by chat. But I think I said something like, hey, I don't know if this is how it's supposed to go, but I'm just gonna be honest, I'm a little bit frustrated because these things that we're getting into, I don't care about. Like I'm here for the mission. Like I want to do that. All these other things that are happening in the streets, all these things, they're frustrating me because they're just obstacles that I don't want to deal with. They're not fun obstacles. They're not interesting to me. It's just, it's like you're slowing us down. Like I just want to get to the place. Can we just get to the adventure? So I had that experience with it. And that's my only time I played Into the Odd. But like I said, I can't speak for whether this is how that they mean you to run it, or through the just how this particular GM was interpreting how they're running it. And of course, everyone's going to have their own thresholds as to like, oh, this is amazing. We're having all these kind of misadventures just kind of on the streets. Or it's like, oh my gosh, can we not? I think my thing is, can we just move 2 blocks without having something weird happen to us? Can we get down the street? Like, I'm thinking like, I live in New York City. I know it's busy here, but you can walk blocks and blocks and blocks without having anything, catastrophic drop into your path, right? And here it was like, I felt like we couldn't move 5 feet. Ian says they're less interested in Bastion Land because they like running their own world, but it is really cool and the art is fire. Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to this article. And who is the author of this said piece? Before I get too far, gosh, these ads are just everywhere. Doesn't say. Okay. If games like D&D and Pathfinder were fiction books, Into the Odd Remastered would be a poem. It's extremely concise, has strict limitations, and it's bursting with imagery to decipher. The final product is something quite beautiful, but it's not going to be for everyone. That's probably a pretty fair assessment, I would guess. Before we get on Into the Odd's cryptic artistic level, let's talk about the tangibles. Into the Odd Remastered is a Kickstarter-funded revamp of the original 2014 tabletop RPG. Writer Chris McDowell, also of Electric Bastion Land fame, has teamed up with publisher Free League and Merc Bourge graphic designer Johan Noor to create an edition with more polish and more otherworldly content. Kickstarter backers are already receiving their copies, but the wider release date for the book is to be confirmed. As a reviewer, I'm entering Bastion, the RPG's industrial age cosmic horror dipped setting, for the first time. Some of my thoughts will likely feel familiar to longtime fans of the game, but I hope to highlight some points that will also help you decide whether this is a book worthy of your shelves. Personally, I'm glad to have experienced Into the Odd, but it feels more like an art piece than a game I can sink my teeth into long term. Let's talk about Johan Noor. When I say the name Merc Bourge, I'm expecting both fiendish cries of delight and guttural groans of fatigue from the tabletop role-playing game community. These days, for every person applauding its beauty and creativity, there's another criticizing its lack of readability, though they may be sated somewhat by the recent plain text version. Noor's unique sense of style is kept firmly separate from the text in Into the Odd. Despite this, it still manages to more than serve its purpose. One of the most impressive feats of Noor's graphic design in recent old-school Renaissance books is it doesn't simply illustrate the RPG, it adds to it. OSR books like Into the Odd are famously minimalist when it comes to the rules, lore, and player handholding that pad out your typical 300-page sourcebook. Into the Odd gives you, at best, a few pages to learn about the city of Bastion and its surrounding areas. Everything else is down to interpretation, and this is what makes the visual design shine. The marbled cover sheets, lithograph-style illustrations, and odd geometric etchings often told me more about the game's world than McDowell's writing. Ooh, there's a bunch of stuff here in the chat. Raptor Jesus, hey Raptor Jesus, I love the name. Says that website looks horrible with all the ads. Yeah, and Ian says needs more mobile pop-ups. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any ad blockers running in this browser at the moment. So if you have anything that's minimizing your ads, I'm not. So yeah, I'm getting a ton. At least it's mostly on the sides, but yeah, It's there. If you're already a fan of the 2014 RPG and you're looking for a piece of art for your tabletop role-playing game collection, this book is a must. If you're new to the RPG in the first place, I'm not as confident in my recommendation. I'm adamant this book will be a masterpiece for the right person, and I firmly believe a lot of the limitations are deliberate design choices rather than oversights. Still, for Into the Odd to be the game it wants to be, it has to shut a lot of players out. I'm really curious what he means, or what, I'm not sure if the author is, what they mean about the statement. For it to be the game that it wants to be, it's got to shut players out. Hopefully they'll delve into that. I don't believe Into the Odd is suitable for new tabletop role-playing game players, and I almost wish the game would fully commit to this fact. It offers a single page, 2 paragraphs to be specific, of definition for anyone new to RPGs, plus a comedic but tonally odd example of how RPGs play around 20 pages later. The advice for new game masters, referees as they're called in the system, is similarly sparse. For those in the world that have only just learned about D&D and are dipping their toes into the hobby for the first time, sometimes that extra 20 pages of hand-holding is necessary. I will say here, I think this is an issue with a lot of OSR games, but I think the balancing factor is that I would be super shocked if somebody new to the hobby ended up with Into the Odd or Into the Odd Remastered in their hands. It's just hard to get to. And when I talked to Chris, I talked about it. Mentions other times, I think we can forget sometimes just how niche OSR can be. When I was at PAX East, talking to people who were playing indie games they grabbed and printed themselves off of itch.io, folks you would think would at least have seen OSR titles, there was no name recognition. So if someone's coming brand new to the hobby, they're probably ending up in a big box, a bookseller like Barnes & Nobles or Target. Maybe they end up in a game store. I even would say probably a lot of game stores. Are they even going to have copies of Into the Odd Remastered? Maybe. I guess now that's Free League, potentially it'll be there. But I think at that point, if you're grabbing it, you're probably talking to somebody. I would hope that if you're new, you're just not going to grab the most esoteric looking thing and just walk out of it without asking somebody in the store anything about it, any guidance. I have a hard time thinking that somebody brand new will end up with it. And of course, as I've been looking at printing prices, if you can hold off adding 20 pages to your book of hand-holding for people that probably your core audience doesn't need their hands being held, then you probably want to do it. Unless you really feel like you're creating something that's going to be in the hands of brand new hobbyists. And I think we can all agree that probably Into the Odd is not that someone can't end up with it, but let's face it, I think most people coming to Into the Odd are coming to it from some experience in RPGs already. Raptor Jesus says, I think a lot of OSR games lean too heavily into the acid punk gonzo art style. Granted, quite a few older modules are like that, but it feels a bit much everyone's OSR product is. I mean, Merc-Bourge, definitely put that on the forefront, probably more than anything else. Though there was stuff like Veins of the Earth, didn't have it so much. I think the art was more, maybe I would call art punkish. But yeah, look, this Johan Noor is amazing. He can do it well, I think, in a way that mostly works. And when I looked at Heretic, if you've missed that stream a couple weeks ago, we looked at Merc-Bourge Heretic. It's very readable, even though it's got this crazy art punk art style. They integrate it in a way that I felt like, yeah, I can really figure everything out. I thought a little bit in Merc-Bourge itself, there were some parts where I struggled with a little bit, but certainly in Heretic, I feel like they found that great balance of, we have this brilliant art style, but it's not impinging too much on the readability that someone just trying to find something when they're in the middle of a game session is going to be confused. But a lot of folks can't do it that well. And they try to ape that style. They don't nail it. And yeah, you end up with a visual mess. Okay. Where were we? Into the Odd is committed to minimalism in all other areas too. This is a book that openly admits to prioritizing quickness over realism. This is a book that asks players not to care about details like how long a round of combat lasts for. This is a book that gives very few F's about crunch. Again, none of this is necessarily bad, but the aggressive min-maxers of more complex games may hesitate to enter Bastion. And that's okay. Not every game has to be for everybody. If there's not enough meat for the crunchy min-master types to get a hold of, then it's probably not the game for them. I wonder if they're coming at it, because D&D tries to be the game for everybody, but certainly games like Into the Odd, most of the OSR games really eschew that particular motivation. They're not trying to be the games for everybody. They're trying to be the games for folks chasing a particular experience, and they're open about it, and that allows them to be very laser focused on that. So I think it's, I wouldn't necessarily, I know they're not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but they're kind of pointing out a little bit like, oh, well, you're all of a sudden min-maxers aren't going to want to play this, but that's okay. Maybe this is what they're mean when he's talking about, or when the author's talking about how Into the Odd is going to be is excluding a lot of players on this journey to be where it is, because maybe at the end they're going to say, well, if you're a min-maxer, you're not going to like it. If you're someone else, you're not going to like it. If you love crunch, you're not going to like it. But as long as all this stuff is up front, I think that's better than a game that maybe is trying to or claiming to service all these different game styles and then fails in subtle ways that you're not going to discover until you actually get into it. I think, let's say Pathfinder Second Edition. I've heard. I haven't never played it, but I've heard and watched some of the things, issues, or at least issues to some whatever. And I think that's kind of part of where it's kind of trying to present down a path. Maybe it veers off in various ways, and depending on your outlook, it can kind of get away from you or get away from the things that you like. But it's not clear about it up front. Maybe it doesn't even know that what it's doing, or that it's moving in certain directions. Whereas something like Into the Odd, I think it's pretty clear about, hey, this is what we are, and we can tell you very clearly what we're not. Make your choice whether this is something you want to play or not. Raid LC, hey Raid, asks, did I see the release of non-art Bourges for free? I did not. I know it's linked here. I'll have to go back and look at it. But no, I have not seen it. Let's see, where was I? Okay. This quickness ideology led to a few other design choices that depart from the tabletop role-playing game norm. For example, the character you play is chosen for you at random depending on the ability scores you rolled. Initially, this shocked me, as one of my favorite parts of an RPG is the first time, often hours, you spend crafting a playable character. There's also no real story to the book's starter adventure. Actually, let me back a minute. So I think this person is clearly coming from a modern game. Because granted, in no version of D&D were you ever forced into a class, really. But there are oftentimes, depending on which version you're playing, whether you may have been forced out of a class because you don't meet a specific prerequisite, or it's just so negative that you end up being like, well, I can always be a fighter, or I could, or something else, but I can't be this or that. But I think it was clear maybe this person's not coming from having any OSR experience, which I think maybe they said, I don't know, I think they said they didn't have any experience Into the Odd, but maybe they haven't had that much experience with OSR. So I don't think it's that atypical in OSR games to have somewhat limited character generation options, whether it's prerequisites for certain scores, whether it's rolling on tables, or so on. Of course, if you are into that, I don't think Chris McDowell is going to come to your house and cancel your game if you decide to let people pick their classes instead of having it go by stats. There's also no real story to the book's starter adventure. From a DM's point of view, it reads more like the map of a carnival horror maze than an RPG narrative. It's a visceral horror maze filled with delicious detail, but you'll have to scratch any itch for coherent narrative with your own skills, which I think is also a perspective thing. I think a lot of OSR people, that's great. Emergent narrative, here we come. But if you're coming from a more modern perspective, you're expecting more of that, what's the story kind of stuff. Right? Else he says, crunch, 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 crunch. And then he says, lucky enough to play a paladin. Yeah. Well, yeah, and in first edition, right? If you meet the requirements, you roll up attributes high enough to play a paladin. I feel like a lot of groups would have been like, well, you're the paladin. You can't roll that high and not and on those different stats and not be a paladin. Well, then Ray LC says they heard somebody recently talk about their 4-page Pathfinder 2 character sheet. Yeah. Pathfinder 2 I do want to look at, but I remember seeing some videos on YouTube about folks basically abandoning it. And not to say that everybody has, but it seems clear that it didn't hit the mark where I think they wanted it to and where also their community wanted it to. There's probably some really interesting things in there. Maybe I'll have to do their quick, I know they have some kind of at least pared down version of the rules. Take a look at it on stream. Just for interest reasons. Certainly it's, whatever tidal wave of interest in Pathfinder 2 there might have been has long since gone. So it wouldn't exactly be something for me to hang my YouTube metrics on. Like, yeah, I'm going to cover Pathfinder 2 now. But just as something of interest, I think it might be fun. Because I keep hearing about some features that are really good in there, but I haven't really read it myself. I framed many of these points as criticisms of Into the Odd, but I don't fully see them that way. In fact, I'm impressed by the game's design choices. I don't feel I have what I need to enjoy a long-running campaign, but as a short-lived game, or dare I say it, a book to be read rather than played, Into the Odd's design is excellent. I'm wondering this is where I would really love to hear, and maybe they'll get into it, what they feel like is missing for the long running campaign. Because I felt that way about different systems at times, that like this is great for a one shot, but I don't know if I want to play a year's session. Because I think the longer your game is, I feel like the more having some added crunch. Sorry, there's a low flying plane, and hopefully you guys don't hear it. But man, it made it even difficult for me to hear myself speak. What was I saying? Oh, that I think that the longer the campaign runs, the more some crunch in certain places helps. For example, if you get to hex crawling, whatever the crunch that comes with hex crawling is helpful when you start breaking out your campaign more. Or, what is it coming? That plane coming back again? Or spy planes from Paizo. I mentioned Pathfinder 2, so Paizo is buzzing my house. Leave me alone, Paizo! Like the different crunch you get when you start adding those levels. Domain management, you get some extra crunch. And I also think that's where, at least for me, the appeal of Gonzo kind of really drops off. Because I think I probably come off as being somewhat anti-Gonzo. And I'm not if I'm playing a one-shot or just a fun kind of comedy, toon fantasy role-playing. I'm fine. Go nuts. But I don't know that I think I've seen something that really sustains that at least high Gonzo in a way that is compelling for me. Being rushed into a strange and unexplainable world and playing a character you've barely been introduced to encourages you to roleplay in ways you may never have considered before. A lack of direction gives game masters the kind of freedom they often crave when running pre-written adventures. Like writing poetry, the constraints force you to be more creative. Bastion combines the smog and oppression of industrial-age London with the unspeakable terrors of a Lovecraft novel. I can believe this is a world where your choices don't matter and you never truly understand what's going on around you. Into the Odd commits to a vision where the game mechanics almost perfectly match its flavor, but I won't pretend it's a book every player will enjoy. Oh, okay. Well, that's the end. No, it was written by Molly Russell. I mean, look, I think it's a fine review. I think her point of view is well put forward. I think I'd like to, just for myself, certainly for purposes of discussion and these kind of things, these sorts of mediums like we're in right now, I would love to know more about what they think holds it back from being a campaign type game. But I think that some of the OSR and NSR or whatever, these kind of indie games, I think are moving maybe more towards what we see in Powered by the Apocalypse type games, where they're very focused on particular experiences and they're not really pretending to move outside of that, to be broader, right? You play Monsters of the Week, you're doing Monsters of the Week, and that's it. That's the game's Monsters of the Week. It's right there. You don't want to play a game that's about Monsters of the Week, then don't play Monsters of the Week, right? If that doesn't interest you, don't play it. If you don't feel like that kind of game, don't play it. That's the kind of thing. And I think that Into the Odd maybe leans a little bit like that. And, hey, this is the game you're playing. This is the experience we're going after, and everything's focused on that. So we can make all our rules and all our judgments and everything really match this experience. But if this experience isn't the thing you're looking for, then you're probably not going to find that here. Though, of course, nothing is, she doesn't make any mention in here about, well, could you take this stuff out and use it with other games? Could you put in the systems that you feel are lacking? All the things that I think those of us who are fairly embedded in the OSR games, it almost comes second nature of, oh, well, this Into the Odd doesn't have that, but I can pull that in from Troika, or I can bring this thing in from this other game, or just BX or whatever, and just drop it in there, and I'll be good to go. But it is interesting from an outside perspective, which I think is important, is, hey, if someone is running into this and they're a 5th edition gamer and somehow they got one, somehow their grandmother went into a gaming store and said, my grandson plays D&D 5th edition, but they want something a little bit odder and weirder, and what can I give them? And the person in the store hands them a copy of Into the Odd and they take it home. I think it is interesting and important to know kind of what that looks like to someone coming from that perspective, which it seems like she is. All right, here we got some comments back here. Raptor Jesus says they've been playing DD for a long time. Their simple BX character ends up having 6 pages, but he was also a lord of a stronghold. And they had lists of treasure and stuff like that. I think the thing is that we a lot of games will pride themselves. When I say a lot of games in the OSR space will pride themselves on having these tiny character sheets. Oh, look, you can have your character sheet on a index card. Look, you can have it on a stamp. Look, you can engrave it on the head of this microscopic pin with an electron microscope, and all that's great. But I think we imagine at least that that's at game start. That over time you're going to accrue all sorts of stuff, equipment, gold, treasure, whatever, money, residences potentially, hirelings, connections, domains, spell books, spells, all this stuff is going to end up adding on to the end of it. So I don't think it's necessarily how much your pages you are. And I think if you end up a campaign and you have 5 or 6 pages of character sheet, like to me, that's awesome. But sometimes it's, well, where did I start? Did I start with 5 pages of character sheet and then I added 1, or did I start with a note card? And because of all the stuff I've done in the game, it's like my character story has played out as their character sheet has increased. And of course, also, what's on that character sheet? Is it a whole bunch of stuff that's very crunchy and technical, but very specific to certain circumstances? Or is it more general, like, hey, look at the stuff? Like, does your character sheet really represent sort of how your character's grown in the game? Or is it just a whole bunch of crunch about, oh, look, here's my critical, if someone critical hits me, here's all my armor pieces and where they are in my body, or here's whatever, however other crunchy that kind of stuff gets. So there's a whole bunch of different stuff with character. Or is it 4 pages of backstory and plus a note card stapled on top of their actual stats? Right? Could be all kinds of different things. Raptor Jesus also says, so Pathfinder gets a bit much because you have like 4 pages of level 1 when you don't know anything about it. Older D&D eases you into a slower pace. Yep. And the Raid LC says, when everything is weird, nothing is weird. Yes, and I think for me with the everything is weird, it's that does the world still have coherence? Because I think the part about Gonzo over a long term that I don't care for is when it stops making sense in a way that as a character I can prepare for. There's certain Gonzo you can have that I think works fine when it becomes something that, okay, even if it's weird, even if it doesn't, but it goes by some kind of logic or rule or some sort of context that makes sense. But if stuff's just kind of happening because, hey, it's happening and I rolled on a table, so now it's raining, meatballs, and then 10 minutes later it's raining meteorites, and the meatballs were fine, but now the meteorites are killing folk, including you. I can't plan for that. What can I do? If I get caught out in the open and all of a sudden the rain of meteors comes down and I'm just getting shelled and knocked out or killed, what am I going to do about that? There's nothing. I don't feel like the game was fun or fair, in that fairness being that I can kind of try to plan stuff. Like, yeah, I didn't know I should have brought my cast iron umbrella so that I wouldn't get killed by meteorites or what. So that's kind of where it sort of loses me, when I think it does better when you have that, okay, I kind of understand the world. The world may have Gonzo elements, but they're understandable. So now I can plan and make those and make choices for myself that make sense. In a one shot, I don't care. Oh, it's raining meatballs. Oh, it's raining meteorites. Now I died. Oh, I'll roll up another guy. Fine. But when I'm starting to get invested, when I'm watching my guy, when I'm watching my character sheet grow and I'm really into that and just odd stuff is happening that's knocking them down, then I think that's when things turn to being, for me anyway, frustrating rather than fun. Raptor Jesus says, I think my theme for my brain today is front-loaded complexity versus gradually adding onto the complexity. So Gonzo is fine, but not all up in your face. A gradual change to Gonzo might be better. Yeah, and you could do a lot to moderate. Could be certain locations. If you're going into the plane of wild magic where wild magic stuff's going to happen, hey, a lot of wild stuff's going to happen, and at least I know that up front, and I'm making the choice as a character to go into the realm of wild magic. Now, maybe there's something there I need or whatever, but I can think about, okay, and like I can game plan it. All right, we're going into wild magic, and every 10 minutes something wackadoo is going to happen, so let's try to bring all the stuff with us to try to do that. Let's game plan it. Let's, we can try to figure things out. Maybe we just say, hey, if things happen every 10 minutes, then we're going to use 9-minute windows to try to get out or get into cover or get something else. Great, we could plan for it. But when it comes to that point where the Gonzo has overtaken the planning part, where you can no longer plan for it and it's not contextualized in any way, then, like I said, for me, it just starts to become a negative. Radio C says, I love character creation in Bachelorland and many OSR adjacent games. When we made Pathfinder characters, this was a 3-hour ordeal. Min-max your dream, and I'm glad it exists, but it was easy to shift away from. Especially as you get older and you had less free time. Yep. Raptor Jesus says, it sounds a lot like GURPS, fine system, and all the difficulties front-loaded in character creation. Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of, when I was a teen and early versions of GURPS were out there, man, I created character after character of GURPS. But yeah, I mean, I had more free time. I had more free brain space to sit there and think about think about all that stuff. I don't want to do that now. I'd rather, if I'm going to have 3 hours, if I'm going to have the one day a week or every other week that I'm going to have 3 hours to game, I don't want to spend all that doing character creation. And I don't want to do it in 3 hours leading up to the 3 hours. Like, I want to play. I want to play. Ian says, is there an RPG with a dedicated page of the character sheet committed to property deeds? There probably is. I would say that the closest I've seen anyway would probably be Pendragon, which I think has worksheets for your domains. I don't remember if you start, depending on how you start the game and everything, whether you have a domain or not. But yeah, I would say probably Pendragon comes closest. All right. So that was, I guess, I'm not sure who, I guess they're Prestigious Taste 434 on Reddit. Thanks for posting that review. It was certainly interesting. Okay, reverse Appendix N. I don't know what that means. Modern Appendix N. Boy, a lot of Appendix N's talk going on. Minions, Made to Standees, Exalted Funeral, Digital Convention. Time tracking a knave. I'm not up on my knave enough. Here we go. This should be good. Factions, influence, and politics systems created by P Black 476. It's still a first draft, but I tried to encapsulate a lot of what was said in these forums in the last few days on the subject without going into making a mini game that just the GM plays behind the scenes. Feedback is greatly appreciated. Credits too on downtime and domains for a bit of the text in the deeds section, even if I believe that to be more or less a placeholder for a more refined version later on. And we have some URL shortener that's going to take us to... Oh, no, that's not a URL shortener. That's actually the site. IBCO. I'll post this in the chat in case... Oh, let's see. This is... What did they call this? Factions, influence, and politics. Factions, influence, and politics. If you want to check it out, it's at https://ibb.co/lowercase f, lowercase k, uppercase d, 9, uppercase n, 6, lowercase g. Politics. Notoriety. If notoriety is not already established by the fiction, roll a d8, and if the result is below the median level of the PCs... All right, let me take some, what is this? Blood orange and orange juice, seltzer water for the working man. Okay. Let me start that again. Notoriety. If notoriety is not already established by the fiction, roll 1d8, and if the result is below the median level of the PCs, excluding hirelings, the party is known by name and or deeds. Otherwise, they are total strangers. Notoriety is rolled once on the first meaningful encounter with each faction. Strangers do not affect faction politics and will always have a faction standing of 0. It is the prerogative of the referee to determine which event eventually makes a party of strangers into a known party. Faction standing. The party has a different standing with each faction. Encounters. When a reaction roll is made, a result lower than 6 incurs a loss of 1 point of standing with that faction, and a result above 8 grants +1 standing. Help/hinder. Helping a faction increases standing with them, and hindering or hurting them decreases it, as long as they know it. Amounts vary by significance. And then postures. Factions adopting different postures based on the party's standing. Okay, so during encounters... We're rolling a reaction roll. If you roll lower than 6, you lose a point of standing. If you roll above an 8, you're granted 1 point of standing. And this is a D12 roll. If I'm remembering correct, D12, I'm pretty sure it's D12. So 7s, Lucky sevens is basically nothing happens. All right, really 6, 7, 8 because it's lower or lower. So really you have to roll 5 or lower or 9 or higher. So 6, 7, 8, which is the majority on a D12 roll, is 0. I mean, I think the interesting thing there is I don't know if I would base it on the reaction roll. And the reason is I want the party to be able to dig themselves out of a hole. So let's say you're a party, you're, I don't know, what's the red legs, the gang, the feared red leg gang is operating in these areas. You're the party, you encounter a band of red legs on the road, you roll and you get, oh, I don't know, you get a low reaction. Low reaction. Okay. There, whatever it is, it's not attack on sight, but it's somewhat, at least somewhat hostile. According to these rules, hey, I just knock off a point of standing. I don't want to do that though, because nothing's happened yet. The reaction roll is basically what their attitude is in that moment. What I want to know is how do they handle this encounter at the end of the encounter, then presuming they're survivors and whatnot, because that's the other thing is if I simply roll a reaction and you lower standing, let's go back to my example. Your party comes up on the road. It's the dead of night. Nobody else around for miles and miles. But a band of redlegs comes upon your campsite by the side of the road, and they start making trouble with you basically because you rolled negatively on your reaction roll. Now, if you slaughter them all to the last man, leave none left alive, how does your standing go down? None of that band of redlegs has survived to tell anybody what horrible curs you were. They're dead, so that doesn't make sense. On the other hand, same scenario, they rolled negatively. They're coming up, they're jawing at you, but somehow you're able to turn it around, appease them, offer them some ale, offer them some meat, send them off with full bellies and a little extra drink in hand. They're going to go back and they're going to talk you up. And I would say you should gain standing, even though you started off on the wrong foot. That was okay. You recovered. The party did their stuff. So I would want to look at it and say, I don't care what the reaction roll is to start the encounter in terms of standing. I want to know how does the encounter end. Then I want to give you standing, assuming there are people left alive to tell. It could end positively, but all the red legs are dead because some carrion crawler ate them all. You just happened to stop something, but no one survived to tell the tale. And same thing, if it ends negatively and some red leg gets away, then I want to adjust your standing. So I think that's a little bit putting the cart before the horse, maybe. Raid LC says, turns him off. Too video game like. Yeah, I think when too much of stuff gets automated, it definitely has that vibe to it. I'm fine with the mechanics, but I want to make sure they're in the right spot. And like I said, for that one, I'm fine saying, hey, if you end your encounters on positive notes or negative notes, which I think, even though I'm usually the person that says, I don't want any kind of GM fiat stuff, to me, that's minor because I think it'll be clear whether it's neutral, in which case you just wouldn't make a change, or whether the sides feel that whatever the faction feels like they've been treated well or poorly. I feel like it's a pretty clear call to make. I don't feel like there's going to be too much hemming and hawing. And if I can't decide, if it's so hard for me to decide whether it was positive or negative, then it probably was neither, and then you just don't give it to them. In any case, you can help or hinder, and then you get this posture. If your standing is -5 or less, then they're just going to try to eliminate you. If it's -4 to -3, they're going to try to block access to most domains from you. If it's just -1 to -2, it'll be ill. They'll just have some ill will. At 0, it's neutral. 1 to 2, they give out goodwill. 3 to 4, they will grant access to most domains. And on 5+, they might offer membership or alliance. Next up, we have ranks and influence. Influence and reach are the end goals of playing faction politics. Rank attains influence, and influence buys reach. Ranks. Every 5th point of standing translates into a rank within the faction. This may be a formal titled rank or an implied one. Once any rank has been attained, faction standing is no longer affected by reaction roll results from faction members. Going below a multiple 5 in faction standings implies loss of the rank it represents. Number of ranks. Small factions will have 2 to 3 total ranks. Medium factions will have 3 to 4. And large ones will have 5. Hey, Terrence, we're looking at, if you scroll up in the chat, you can see my message with the link, but we're looking at a system of factions, influence, and politics. All right, so we want to try to get up in groups of 5. That pulls us up ranks. We go below 5, we lose ranks. Small factions just have a handful of ranks. Medium factions have a few more, and large ones will have 5. Or I guess I say handful, like a 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then 5. Faction council. If decision-making in a faction demands the input of the PCs, the proposal supported by the highest total of ranks wins. Ties go to the side with the highest ranking member. And then influence. Each rank grants 1 point of influence from that faction every month. As for influence, influence acts as means to affect faction politics. Influence from different factions is tracked separately. Influence may be spent too by standing with an allied faction. Each point spent increases standing by 1 with the allied faction and decreases it by 1 with the current faction. Wait a minute, hold on, what? With an allied faction. So not the faction you're in, but the faction you have a relationship with? That, I think we might need to understand a little bit better what's the difference between the allied faction and the current faction. You could buy votes within a faction council at the rate of 5 to 1 for the purposes of a single vote / decision within a faction council. Buy reach at a rate of 5 to 1. And then on reaction rolls, characters may spend influence to add bonuses to reaction rolls against members of the same faction at a 1 to 1 rate, against members of an allied faction at 2 to 1 rate, and against members of a neutral faction at 3 to 1 rate, as long as the factions know of each other. Okay, so we don't know what reach is quite yet, but it looks like we're about to find out. It's a little bit, so obviously there's the faction you're in, which you're getting points from. Then there's allied factions. I think we could say, okay, factions that have some kind of, I'm guessing, formal agreement to help each other. I mean, we'll see whether they mean something that formalized or if it means something more loose as to what allied means. And then neutral. But if you are, at least in terms with buying standing in an allied faction, if you use that, it's kind of, you're basically paying 2 to 1 because you're going to lose 1 standing with the faction you're at, which equates to influence. So it's like you're spending an extra point of influence that you're losing quasi permanently to gain 1 with there. So that's kind of a nice balancing factor, right? Because you don't want people to be able to super min-max all the way up all these different factions. You're going to have to choose. And the more if you're in one and then you start, looking lovingly at another faction, you're going to tend to lose standing with the one you're with. Raptor Jesus says, funnily enough, I think Fallout 2D20's core book has a great starter adventure and it gives you handy tools for how the system plays and how a GM should be setting up his scenes. Pretty rare. Oh, I'll have to check that out. Radel C says, Radel C is saying they've heard good things about it, but they're not a huge Fallout person. And then Raptor Jesus on the Fallout faction rules says, these faction rules have some good ideas. I sort of like using the old school level names as faction ranks, but 5 is also a good number if you're setting up a faction. Yeah, the old school ranks are cool. I like just using them for people. But yeah, I like some of this. And I like the fact that this really seems to be set up for kind of downtime sort of things. I would, that's probably how I would wrap this whole thing up and say, this is a downtime activity. I don't want you doing this like you're going into town and you only have a hot minute before you're out on the adventure and you're like, oh, I want to spend. It's like, no, this is like, okay, I have a month. What are you doing with the month? You get this influence in your downtime that you could spend and you spending that month doing Red Legs gang business, then you get this stuff. And that's kind of how I would position this, that this is one of those downtime activities that you can do. And then then these are some handy mechanics that go along with it. All right, let's see. We've got reach now. Reach is the currency of power and is necessary to grow out of the adventure role into the later stages of character development in the game. Reach is spent executing deeds within a dominion or location. If characters are strangers, see notoriety, in a dominion, they normally cannot spend their reach there. So now we have this concept of a dominion, which they have not mentioned yet. Independent faction. Characters may choose to build their own path independently as opposed to integrating with the existing factions. In this case, characters may spend 25,000 gold pieces and a month to acquire 1 point of reach. This represents socializing, politicking, and networking with the right people. Once a guild, den, stronghold, cult, or other organization is established by a party of median level 9 or higher, they gain 1 automatic reach point per month. Each point of reach acquired by these methods grants 2 points of influence. So I like this. I would probably do something, figure out how we could start this earlier. I usually look at characters as kind of winding down at level 9. Of course, you don't have to. But something I really liked when we looked at Birthright was the fact that you can really start your domain stuff from a low level if you want it. You could start from level 1, start working your domain. So I would want to do that. I mean, granted, level 1 folks are not going to have 25,000 gold pieces. But, that's a choice they have. I mean, really, you could look at these numbers and say this essentially is if you could spend this in lieu of, if you're doing XP for loot, let's say, you could use this to level up or go towards character level, or you can try to be establishing yourself as I don't want to say an influencer, a fantasy Enneagram influencer. No, establish yourself as a power. And that's a choice you can do. And you could probably work out the numbers, maybe even along some kind of levels, like how those things, or just work it in with establishing some kind of stronghold somewhere puts you at level 1. And then you can build that up and do things and kind of work it in with probably leaning on some of the Birthright things that they had in terms of structures and that kind of things of spreading your influence out and kind of meld it in with this system a bit. Terrence says that their dominion is all the lands between the fridge and the couch. Yep, that works for me. And now we have deeds. So we have minor deeds. These give you 1 reach. Own or run a business employing up to 10 people. Purchase or sell trade goods in bulk. Employ more than 10 hirelings. Affect the outcome of a trial. Have someone arrested on a minor charge. Bribe authorities without fear of repercussion. Does not guarantee the bribe will be accepted, only that it will not be discovered. Well, that's not the same thing. Without fear of repercussion doesn't mean you're not discovered. It means you're not afraid of being discovered. Someone can get discovered, and you might, and then when they're in the trial for that bribery, you go, my goodness, he had no fear of getting caught. That's not the same as not getting caught. So they might need to figure out what they mean. Is it just being super bold with a bribe, just tossing a bag of coins on the table of the local sheriff and just being like, yeah, what are you gonna do about it? Take the money or take the steel? What was it like plata y whatever the thing that the drug dealers would say, like gold or what was it, like gold or iron or whatever? You're gonna take the bullet or you're gonna take the gold? And the same thing, right? You laying that down on the table in open broad daylight in this sheriff's office, that's doing it without fear of repercussion. That does not mean that it won't get discovered or that you won't even get in trouble for it. So if you mean not getting discovered, that's slightly different. Purchase existing property or practice magic in the city. Magic with a capital M. So this definitely has some setting implications because this has got to be something more than just I go into the back alley behind the tavern and cast magic missile on a rat and there it is. There's a minor deed. That seems kind of lame. Connor Gallagher says, just turned in. What book is this? Not so much a book. I will post up again. Connor, somebody posted this to Reddit. This is an excerpt when they're working on called, or at least about factions, influence, and politics. I'll go back to it's just a first draft. But they posted it here and it seemed interesting. So I figured, let's take a look. That's where Raptor Jesus says, strongholds are really fun. I've had groups make entire towns by building their specific class strongholds. It's something that can happen at high levels. The group drifting apart. Or as the group drifting apart? Definitely groups can drift apart in terms of what they want to do. And yeah, domains allow you to kind of do that without kind of tearing the game apart. So then we have notable deeds worth 2 reach. Make large purchases over 100,000 gold pieces on a trading vessel. Own or run a business employing up to 100 people. Employ mercenaries. Purchase land or build new property. Acquire a standard for an informal group or company. Gain a minor title, gain a license to employ magic commercially, gain a license to have religious followers of an established religion. So there's definitely some implied setting stuff here. You could probably rejigger this a little bit if you don't have magic licenses or, I guess, clerical divine magic licenses. And then grand deeds are worth 3 reach points. Own or run a business employing unlimited people. What is unlimited people? I think you should put a number on there. What a business employing unlimited people? Are you a duke of one of the 9 hells where it's just like, yes, I have a plane full of unlimited people to deploy? I'm not sure what that means. Request military aid. Why would requesting military aid be a grand deed? I feel like fulfilling a request for military aid is maybe the thing that I would look at. Form an official guild, become a member of the nobility, run a school, laboratory, library, church, or equivalent. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, those are ads. Is that it? All right, I think that's it. That's it. All right. Let me see what the comments are. I'm just curious. Oh, no comments yet. All right, I did give them enough vote. I think there's some neat stuff. Neat stuff in here. I think it definitely feels like a first draft. Maybe some of those implied setting things will be made more generic, or maybe they'll lean into some setting that they mean this for. I have not read the Downtime and Domains, but somebody mentioned above that it was really good, that they liked it a lot. So I should probably check that out at some point. I'm down with all the stuff. You know, I think there's just that balance you want to try to find with these rules. Whichever version you like, is that they give you the amount of crunch that you want and abstraction that you want. Some of them get really abstract, and sometimes that's fine, sometimes not so fine. Usually for the player-facing stuff, I kind of like it to be more concrete because I want them to feel it. I want them to be building a stronghold and feel like they're building a stronghold and not just like a usage die or something, or like ticking something up. Like, I want that stuff to feel physical. I want, if you're a player in my game and you have the money and the wherewithal to build a stronghold, I want you to want to take out the graph paper and plot out where your walls are going to be and all your defenses and not that, and look at it as a real place and not just a pip on a board somewhere, right? So I want that kind of granularity on your side. Now, if there's a way to take the player-facing granularity and crunch, and then but abstract it on the GM side, where you can make all your walls and things, but I can kind of bottom line that fairly easily into a number or a quick and easy set of statistics that I can reference. If I can take, hey, you're talking about, as a player, I'm going to have 100 men and this or that, but I can then boil those 100 men down into one figure that equals that force that I can move around, and that's great. So, for me, I'd love both. I want the players to feel all that, have all that cool, fictional, fun stuff, but at the same time, if it's possible, and I'm not suggesting necessarily that it is, but then on the GM side, tools to abstract that stuff into easier to use figures that we can work with. But this is fine, and it's a first draft, so there'll probably be more to come, I imagine. And wow, we're already at 55 minutes. Yep, Into the Sesson Citadel is crowdfunding. I'll just give an upvote. I'm going to try to get a hold of those guys again. I talked to them about Into the Word and Wild. I did a read through and I had an interview with those guys. They were great. I'm going to see if I can get a hold of something for that. If I can. Help me pick a rule set. Okay, what are good supplements to bring D&D flavor into OSC that isn't TSR? I don't know if you do. What do you need to bring D&D flavor? Good supplements are just your reading, your imagination. I'm not sure what that means. D&D flavor is just a hodgepodge of all kinds of fantasy stuff with a sword and sorcery, maybe 5 over the top of it. So anything you can think of that can do that will give you D&D flavor. Hack a World of Dungeons that they made. I don't really know much about World of Dungeons. I don't really know much about OSC Advanced. Someone's asking for PC reputation notoriety mechanics. It's pretty much up there somewhere they could find. Oh, here we go. I'll go to the encumbrance table, but I'm just going to upvote all these guys. All right, let's see this. New optional encumbrance table for BX. Thanks to the input from numerous other users, I've recreated a much more simple variant table for adjustments to encumbrance based on character strength for basic expert. It uses a times 10% per strength score range adjustment based on the existing bonuses and penalties due to adjustments table in the expert rulebook. The 9 to 12 strength score range is the median value set, and the ratio is 10 coins equals 1 pound. Let us see. So this is a nice table for adjusted maximum encumbrance weights by coins. And then we've got percentage. We have several columns here. First column's got the strength scores. Second column's got a percent adjustment. Third column's regular movement. Fourth column, reduced movement 1. Fifth column, reduced movement 2. Then finally, sixth column, reduced movement 3. So let's just say we have your average strength between 9 and 12. If you're moving at regular movement, in combat, let's say 40 feet per turn, you can carry up to 400 coins. And then your movement gets cut by 10 feet if you carry between 401 and 600 coins. And that's cut by an additional 10 feet if you're carrying between 600 and 800 coins. And then it's cut down by an additional 10 feet if you're carrying up to 1,600 coins, which is your max weight. Cool. This hasn't come up that much for me, but I like that. That's nice. Nicely done. Might find it useful. I haven't looked at the table in the expert book in a while, so I'm not sure. I'm guessing it's probably not that user-friendly table. Can we get one more in here before we skedaddle for the day? What if scenario, a D&D rumbling? This might be too long. DCC automated character sheet, tunnels and trolls, OSR systems with character build options. Oh, here, this might be one just to see what people are saying. Posted by Deadly Weapons 00. How do you make your hex maps? I don't mean like how you make them technically, like what programs or art tools you use, but how exactly do you design and fill out a hex map? Having recently tried to make one, I realized it was hard. Far harder than making a normal map. At no point did I feel it was good. It always felt empty and more bland than I'd like. Though I do demand perfection of myself more than I should. I figure I'm missing something here, so I implore those with more knowledge on this than I. How do you make your hex maps? Now, I could probably point them to a number of my videos and streams where we have, and for various purposes, created hex maps, but I shan't do that yet. Connor Gallagher, referring back to the encumbrance map, says they'd like it better if it went up by 50 instead of 10%. And then Raptor Jesus thought that they thought a 208-pound limit for an 18 strength was a bit short, to be honest, but I'm not an expert on weightlifting. I'm not sure. I think the thing is, there's always gives and takes between these sorts of rules and reality. You kind of got to play loosey-goosey with it. The way I would explain it to a player, if a player at my table, if Raptor Jesus, you were a player at my table, and we're running all the math on this, and I'm like, yeah, man, you hit this limit, and you just can't carry anymore, and you do some things like, hey, man, it's only 200 pounds, I would say, well, sure, it sounds great. It's only 200 pounds, but it's not. You're not outfitted to carry that in ways that are efficient. You got bags of coins that are dragging down at your knees. You have stuff over your shoulder here. You have things over there. It's not. You don't have it in a way that is in a perfectly calibrated form to make it easy to move. That technology doesn't exist yet. That stuff doesn't exist. You don't have access to it. You've got stuff coming off you at all kinds of odd angles and odd bulks in ways that are getting into it. So that's where you're at. You just can't. You can't figure out a way to get any more of this weight on you in a way that you can do that and move. And that's it. And hopefully I explain that to you in a manner that you can go, all right, makes sense. All right. And is it exact? No, because you maybe go out there and figure out a way to do more, sure. But in terms of the game, we just say, yeah, that's all you can manage before it just gets too unwieldy to do more with. And that's just what I would do. And then beyond that, it's like we're just going to kind of not worry about that whether the other actual number is a little bit high, a little bit low, a little bit sideways, we're not wearing it. Terrence says I'm wrong because they're wearing armor made of fanny packs. Well, what are those fanny packs filled with? That is the question. And then Connor says, I personally can carry 200 pounds easily in my suburban house, but carrying 200 pounds across rough terrain is very difficult. Right. And especially given the kinds of tasks you're trying to do, combat, moving carefully. You're not a moving man. You're not just trying to pick it up and cart it 10 feet. This is ongoing movement for hundreds of feet, hours. You know, it shows up as minutes, but it's like, this is, you're talking about, can you do this for extended periods of time? You could probably change the system and say, not only am I going to give you movement penalties, because remember, the one thing the system is giving you as a player, which some systems might do differently, is you're not getting any negative modifiers to stuff you're trying to do. You're just being slowed down. You could easily say, all right, you know what? I'm going to say that, hey, you get down to 10 feet movement. You can keep moving. I'm not going to move it, but you're going to start getting -2s, -4s on everything you're trying to do until you get to the point where you're out of, you're at some crazy negative number. You just can't do anything anymore. You could probably figure something out like that, but this is how the game chose to mechanize it in slowing down your distance, slowing down your movement distance until you're immobile, as opposed to adding tons of penalties on the things you're doing. So you could look at that and say, well, hey, sure, maybe it's a little bit light in terms of what I can carry, but I can swing my sword around in combat and I can do it just fine with all this crap that I'm carrying around. As opposed to a different system that you might say, well, you can carry 400 pounds, but guess what? When you've got the 200 pounds and you're in combat, you're at a -8 to attack anything. So good luck there, buddy. So, you know, think of it that way. There's you get some give and you got some take. Quietus says they just throw ish on around the map that fits the region's theme they're going for. Then they throw some more random ish to fill it in some more. No need to fill every hex, though. The players need some room to breathe. Plus, they're also random encounters. You can always add more features later, so don't sweat it. Start small, expand later. For inspirations, you can't go wrong with the Wilderlands of High Fantasy. I'll upvote that, but folks, you really can't. I don't know how you can get a hold of Wilderlands of the High Fantasy right now. Barry Bunny points to the Alexandrian. Filling in the blanks is on sale. It's also another good one. Someone mentions practice. That's good. Skull Fungus draws them by hand. Also mentions Chicago Wiz. Alistair brings up the Asgar fantasy map generator. Though these, you know, again, folks, he's not asking for generators. He's asking for actual guidance. I understand what you're saying. I've mentioned this too in part of when you fill up these giant maps with tons of hexes, and then you look at it and go, yeah, it seems blank. It seems like there's just oodles of the same hill hex. You know, like I have 500 hill hexes now. How do I differentiate all those? And what you can do is just not have 500 hill hexes. It's one solution, but I see what they're saying. It's not so much that they're having an issue generating, literally just dropping hexes on the board. It's how do I do it in a way that feels like a place, and it feels like something that's fulfilling, not just I need it. Alter Quest fan says very, very carefully. All right. Terrence loves Skull Fungus's art. Oh, I didn't know Skull Fungus was an artist. I have to look that up. Ian Boyce says, got to drop your sack of gold to fight. Yep, you might. Raptor Jesus says, encumbrance rules are one of those tough things to figure out, to be honest. Yep, they are. They are. There's no real two ways about it. No two ways about it. It definitely is a toughie. I mean, on the hex maps, so Deadly Weapon 00, you probably will not see this, and if maybe I'll even throw a couple links in there afterwards. They can check out some videos. It probably even wouldn't be this one. It would be the Gygax 75 maybe when we did some hex work for that. And I don't know. I got a bunch of hex videos there. You just got to find that balance. There is a certain amount of practice. There's a certain amount of just kind of seeing in your mind what you're looking for, and then being able to translate that to the hexes so that you can kind of vibe it. I would start small, especially if you're looking at those spaces where it's just endless repetitions of the same hex, and you're thinking, how am I going to fill this up? Start small. Don't deal with that much. Just do a little bit of area, fill in a little bit more as you're going. If you can do the discipline of the Chicago Wiz 3 hex one, that's probably as simple as I would dare go. I like to do a little bit more just because I think I mentioned it when we went over those tools, that I want to be able to, if someone says I go to the highest tree, I climb up the highest tree in the forest and look, I want to have somewhere they can see. And Chicago Wiz potentially could just be looking into a fog of war, or I have to roll it up right there. So I want to build out a little bit more. But that's just my own personal preference. But the less you're building, the more you can spend time on stuff like putting stuff in it and making it feel alive and whatnot. And when you're trying to fill up some kind of 200 by 100 hex, length and width map, then yeah, it's going to seem overwhelming. So guess what? Don't do that. Start small. Start with a 5x5, 6x6 grid of hexes. Fill that up and then just play with it over time. Leave and don't even fill all of it at once. Even if you have all the inspiration in the world to fill out 36 hexes, don't do it. Let your party get in there. Let them muck around. Listen to them. See how the game plays. See what random things you roll up or come out, and then fill in. Use all that stuff to start filling it in. I think you'll find that you'll get a lot different vibe than if you do it all up front. It'll leave room for a lot of discovery, not just for the players, but for you, and it will make your job a bit easier. Raptor Jesus says they like doing things the classic way. Home in the middle with around 4 other towns spread out. So there's like 5 baronies in the Starting Valley. The hex I use takes 1 hour to cross. Okay, so kind of like, what would that be? Like a 3-mile hex? Something like that? Maybe a week to reach each town. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways. I don't mind the 6-mile hex. It does can make things seem like they're really scrunched up close to each other. But on the other hand, remember that the hex is just a symbol. It's just an abstract, high level look. There's 30 some odd square miles of territory in those hexes. So you have to kind of remember that when you're going from the hex into the game. All right, folks. Well, I guess we'll end it here. We didn't get into a whole lot, but I felt like we had quality at the things we looked at. Again, happy Friday. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. If you give a thumbs up on your way out, that would be awesome. If you found yourself in here and you're not subscribed, subscribing would also be awesome. Other than that, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. I'm going to talk to you later. Bye-bye.